Hi, babe.
All right, welcome in everyone. I see that we're still having some folks join us from the waiting room, but it's super exciting to see everyone trickling in one by one. So as we're just kicking things off here, I want to go ahead and direct everyone to take a moment to please introduce yourselves in the chat. And you can let everyone know where you're joining us from, pronouns if you'd like to share those, and the name of the organization you work with if you have one. If you're here representing yourself as a community member, that's great too. And we're super excited that you're here. But as I mentioned, you're going to be getting to know each other a little bit in the chat and introducing yourself. And in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thanks so much for joining us today to discuss the importance of modernizing and growing Appalachian manufacturing through securing federal investments and better policy. So we're super excited to have you here with us. And before we jump into the run of show, I wanted to overview a few housekeeping notes. So the event is going to be potentially live streamed to Facebook. We're still working that out. But going forward, the recording will also be available under our past events on our website. So if you would like to enable closed captioning, please look to the bottom of your screen and you will see the word captions. So you can click that and then click the option to enable closed captioning. Now, after the event, we will send an email to everyone who registered with a recording of the presentation, as well as links to the presentation shared, and any links that may be shared in the chat as well. We're going to hold discussion for the end, and we're going to open with a series of speakers today. But as they're presenting, please feel free to note any questions that you may have in the chat, and we may be able to get to them through the chat. So thanks again for joining us, and anyone who's coming in now, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat, and I'll go ahead and kick things off for us. So my name is Bae Epperly, and I use she, they pronouns. I recently joined the Reimagine Appalachia team back in December as the Sustainable Manufacturing Coordinator. And one of my main roles here at Reimagine is to help advance our Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan. So today's session is kicking off our Manufacturing Action Plan series and helping us to gather more input for the plan and take it to the next level of action. So before we dive more into the topic at hand, which again is securing federal investments and better policy for manufacturing, I wanted to share a bit with you about our AMAP, or our Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan, just to set the scene and set the stage for the conversations that will follow. And you may be familiar with our AMAP because we've developed this for a little over a year now with community members and stakeholders such as yourself and through participatory action research. So if you're familiar with it, a bit of a refresher, and if you're not, I'm excited to share with you a bit about the plan today. So AMAP is our vision to transform Central Appalachia into a hub for modernized, sustainable, and equitable manufacturing. But it's not just a vision. You can also think of it as a regional roadmap that can help guide us from where we currently are to where we want to go, and how we can ultimately transition our region into this hub for modern manufacturing. So it's currently in draft form, and one of my lovely colleagues from Reimagine can hopefully drop that in the chat for you to check out. And we also have a story map that helps to illustrate this vision, and they can drop that in the chat as well for you to review later on. And so this plan for building an Appalachian manufacturing ecosystem builds on our existing strengths, companies, and assets that are already present in the Appalachian region. It recognizes where markets are headed, and it identifies solutions to overcome investment barriers that we have identified through our listening sessions and our participatory action research. And manufacturing is a growing sector of the economy in the United States as well as globally. And this plan ensures that as we grow this sector, we make sure that we do so responsibly. And we do so by centering workers and building local wealth, working to achieve carbon neutrality and global competitiveness, and through reducing waste by employing circular and reuse principles in manufacturing services and systems. And the region is really at this point where we have a choice to do things differently and in an innovative way. And in particular, the Ohio River Valley of Appalachia already possesses a competitive edge to this kind of build out and transition that I'm describing. So we have a long history of manufacturing. We're centrally located to large consumer markets. We have a plethora of shuttered coal plant and brownfield sites that can be transformed and revitalized. We have easy access to carbon-friendly freight, rail, and waterway, highly skilled manufacturing and trades workers, and we have significant levels of waste materials that are largely currently untapped or are being landfilled. But first and foremost, as we're talking about this development and transition, our priority should be to ensure that these emerging markets and the industrial response to this opportunity benefits Appalachia and Appalachians first. Now, I want to share a quick overview of what the plan includes. And again, it's dropped there in the chat so you can review it and check it out. But if you were to open that draft right now, this is what a table of contents would look like. So the initial sections, right when you start out looking at the draft, overview a history of industry in the region and our vision to transform it that I just outlined a few slides ago. And then we have 10 pillars included in the plan. Number one is Make It in Appalachia. So this is Appalachian products and manufacturing. We have reuse, recycle, and repurpose it in Appalachia, redevelop it in Appalachia, so transforming shuttered coal plants and brownfield sites, decarbonize it, so maximizing interest and investments in industrial decarbonization, buy it, driving sustainable procurement and buying local, build it with Appalachian-made products, so leveraging strengths and low carbon materials, work in Appalachia, that's workforce development, apprenticeship programs, and ensuring that we work with labor and unions from planning to implementation of projects. Then we have Grow It in Appalachia, incorporating biomaterial feedstocks and single-use alternatives. Invest in Appalachia, connecting communities with private and public investors. Okay, and then policy platform, and that's why we're here today. That's what I wanted to get at. And so we're developing a federal policy platform, and that will be our regional framework to support advanced manufacturing and community benefits. And so we decided to host this session today in collaboration with a few partners that you'll hear from soon, just to gather more input and feedback from you, stakeholders and community members in the room to help us develop the planning and implementation of this federal policy platform. So you're going to hear more about that here soon. And then finally here, we are also going to soon be developing an advisory board. And the folks that sit on this board will help to develop and finalize the AMAP, help to secure endorsements, and then eventually launch the plan and finalize it. And a few additional next steps, already spoke to a few, so forming our advisory board, building out our federal policy platform, and getting that in front of folks. And we also plan on taking AMAP on the road and doing a road show and webinar series. And that'll be our way to get a last round of input for the draft and move into finalizing and sharing it with communities and stakeholders. Again, developing our federal policy platform, and we are hoping to fundraise in support of the plan as well. And then there's probably more ideas that we don't have or know yet that we may even learn from you today. And so, as I mentioned, today kicks off our series. And next up, we will be taking the AMAP on the road in collaboration with our friends from American Manufacturing Communities Collaborative, or AMCC, who are here with us today, and you will hear from here shortly. And so that first event that's coming up after today will be in person in Huntington, West Virginia, in collaboration again with AMCC and Act Now. This will be on July 7th. And we'll share this out with folks that registered after as well, so that you'll have this full list of upcoming events. Following that, we will be partnering again with AMCC and Catalyst Connection for another in-person stop, July 9th in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Then we're going to do a virtual roadshow event stop, so that if you're not able to join us in person, you can join us virtually. That'll be on September 8th. And then finally, we will have a final webinar and or potentially an Appalachian Manufacturing Action Plan Summit on Tuesday, October 6th. So we hope that you can join us for some of these that are coming up, and we look forward to continuing these conversations with you. And then before I wrap things up here and transition into the next speaker, I just wanted to point out one key thing that we should focus on today, which is how we can start taking the steps to achieve this vision and build out this plan that I just outlined. So we have the vision, and I think the vision is really good. I may be biased, but I really believe in it. And now we just need to figure out how to put some of this into action. So a huge part of this is strategizing around what we can get done in the near future and how we can also simultaneously go ahead and start prepping for long-term economic revitalization in the Appalachian region. So with that being said, now I'm going to pass it off to my wonderful colleague Dana to get us thinking about some of the near future action by sharing with us the current federal landscape and how we can get ready and advocate for future possibilities and opportunities. So I'll stop sharing here and I'll pass it over to you, Dana.
Thank you. Oh, wonderful, Bay. Thank you so much. And you can pause the screen share, I think. So thinking about sustainable manufacturing and how we want to grow it is definitely a call to assess our policy models and what we're prioritizing and what's coming out of them and how we can be building these new opportunities while including the perspectives of communities, our workers, and protecting our lands. We've seen a lot of recent changes, understatement of the century, with the Trump administration and with some of the bills we've seen in Congress. And so the question is, how can we lay the groundwork for the future of manufacturing that we want to see, and what are the kind of policy choices we can make to set ourselves up for where we want to be in a couple years? So just to think about what some of the options are to provide a little context. So I'm Dana Kuhnlein, based in Ohio. Sorry to introduce myself earlier. But I coordinate a lot of our policy work. My specific policy background and expertise is a lot about land use and mine reclamation. And so I'm newer to the manufacturing sector. So I just want to say that out, but I'm not new to how we can interact with DC. So the Reimagine policy-wise, we tend to really focus on federal level policy just because we work in a lot of different states and those states have such different processes. So, but I do know that a lot of folks here have a ton of expertise on working at the state level, and that's really welcome. And so, you know, we can talk about that as well. We're not against it, but I'll just say a lot of our work is going to focus on that federal context. And so just to paint a picture of what the federal context looks like right now, every year there's a couple big opportunities to shape federal policy and legislation. The biggest one comes with it's what's called appropriations. And that's the process of the Congress setting the country's annual budget for the year. And so, the president, whoever the president is, they always come out with their president's budget, and those are their requests for the year. And so you may have seen rumors that like President Trump wants to cut FEMA's budget by 100% or EDA by 100%. Or last year there was in the president's budget was a massive 93% cut to the Appalachian Regional Commission. Just for context, those are requests from the president. At the end of the day, Congress holds the purse strings and Congress really sets the budget for the United States. Now, there have been a couple moments of interesting legality regarding how the president treats that. But at the end of the day, Congress sets the budget. And so a lot of our priorities around manufacturing, when we think about technical assistance, providing money for entrepreneurship or research, R&D, workforce and training, site repurposing, infrastructure creation, a lot of supply chain stuff. A lot of that stuff is actually going to intersect with the appropriations process because they're funding this sort of baseline federal government operations. So that is one of the big places that Reimagine is going to start thinking about federal policy. And the timeline of what that looks like is, in theory, that federal budget is supposed to be passed at the end of every September. So September 30th is that budget deadline. You've probably heard every year, we have shutdowns, we have, continuing resolutions. That's because they very rarely meet that deadline of September 30th. And then we're always in a pickle while they puzzle that out. And so this year, the budget got passed in like little pieces all throughout from like December to March. But whatever Congress does, it's still our job to influence them as if they were going to make their timeline. And so this summer, like the spring and summer are the peak times to really get involved in those budget appropriations conversations. And so one of the reasons we wanted to have this talk today is because we want to think, do we have priorities for this year's appropriations that we want to make sure Congress is remembering? And then just other opportunities to kind of shape federal policy. The other kind of really big opportunities that we see are in kind of standalone or omnibus packages. So we had the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS bill. And what those are really big packages of a bunch of little bills kind of all slapped together and move together and sort of, these really big packages. There's been some talks about and so last year, the really big thing that changed a lot of manufacturing stuff was the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, OBBBA. It was passed around last 4th of July. That was a reconciliation bill, which is just a wonky word for a type of legislative process. And so we saw a lot of cuts and changes to policy pieces that were part of Inflation Reduction Act that certainly intersect a lot with the solar industry. And, it's going to really dampen probably the supply chain for batteries because electric vehicles got cut, supply chain for solar manufacturing. We might see less solar production, things like that. And so all of these big policies kind of trickle down. And so we would need to keep an eye on those as well. I just wanted to get a sense of kind of what the federal landscape is and that timing. So I always talk about when we think about our policy priorities is what are the things that no one else will do if we don't? What are the things that really work for Appalachia and maybe are specific to Appalachia or specific to the problems that we have in Appalachia or the solutions we want to see? And if we don't talk about them, who will? And then you can look at what's winnable, like what can we actually get? Sometimes those aren't the same thing. I love it when they are, but sometimes sometimes we do have to fight for something that seems less likely because it's so important. And then sometimes we fight for something we might not care as much about if we know we can win it. So there's a little bit of triage that happens there. And then I'm always thinking about maybe something is very important, but another group has it under control. So do we have to work on it or not? Because we always have limited time. And so I'll probably pause there. I can answer any more questions if folks have them. But just to kind of say, maybe just to wrap it up, some of the policy, and because Rika's going to go into a little bit more of the specifics of what we've identified using these kind of different criteria that I mentioned for the appropriations process. But the broader policies that we've identified, and these were sent out in pre-reading, if any of you guys are wizards and actually got to read that, 100 gold stars, but is research, innovation, and entrepreneurship as one category that we see the federal government as being able to support, workforce and training, infrastructure, and site repurposing. So how do we one question to that is how do we reuse old sites that we've seen close in the region? How can we bring new life into those? Standards, data, and oversight, getting more information about what's working and having more oversight into ethical processes so that the more ethical things are, the more sustainable businesses can have a chance in the market. if you're doing things ethically, creating market demand, supply chain support for building those supply chains, and then also protecting our people and our land and making sure that communities have a seat at the table when we look at new development. So those are the priorities that we've outlined. Those we will get those to you in writing. You don't have to memorize all of those, but just to kind of plant the seed. If we're missing anything, let us know. But Rika, I'll hand it over to you to put a little more detail on some of what you and I have been looking at over the last couple months with
All
partners.
right, thank you. Okay, I will share my screen. And as you can tell, Dana is our expert in everything appropriations. I know a little bit more about manufacturing, federal programs that support manufacturing. So the two of us joined forces to draft an appropriations letter with manufacturing policy priorities. That's in a draft, and we are happy always for feedback regarding that letter. But I will outline a little bit the priorities that we have in the letter. Okay, I actually don't see my entire presentation. Let me change that. Now I can. Okay, so manufacturing policy for Appalachia. How can the federal government help grow advanced manufacturing in Appalachia? What are the programs we want to see prioritized by the federal government? We want to see programs that target energy communities. Energy community is a federally defined term. Broadly speaking, it includes communities that have been negatively impacted by the declining coal industry. We want to see programs that help turn liabilities into economic assets. There are various research programs that look into critical mineral and rare earth elements extraction from coal-based waste products, and there are an abundance of those in Appalachia. We also want to see programs that support turning a shutter coal plant or other industrial sites into modern manufacturing hubs. There are various federal programs, technical assistance programs that help small and mid-sized manufacturers, and we want to see funding for those. And also we want to see programs that support Appalachian workers and communities through workforce and economic development programs. Sorry. I cannot. I tried to get to the next slide. Are you seeing the same slide still?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I don't know.
Try your pointer.
I think when you just went down towards the bottom left corner, you should see
there you go.
There
Okay,
you go.
I can scroll up. Okay, we are back on. As Dana said, we try to structure those programs based on policy priorities, policy priority buckets. The programs I'm presenting or the priorities I'm presenting today fall under research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, workforce and training programs, and programs that help create market demand and supply chain support. And I can say that I mean, this is like not set in stone. There are various programs that could fall under two of those buckets, but yeah, we have to make, or I did make a distinction of where I put the programs that I will presenting now. Okay, let's look at the policy priority, create market demand and supply chain support. One policy focus of the Trump administration is to strengthen the domestic critical mineral and material supply chain. And that is actually a focus we are happy with. And the Trump administration did continue fund programs that fall under the create market demand and supply chain support bucket. I already mentioned that there are various research programs that focus on the extraction of critical minerals and rare earth elements from industrial by and waste products, such as acid mine drainage, coal ash, and coal waste. And we definitely want to see the focus on industrial buy and waste products. We don't want to see extraction from raw feedstock, essentially new mining. A project that was funded under one of those programs was the rare earth element extraction facility housed at West Virginia University. What they do is they extract REEs from acid mine drainage. And again, with that research, you hope that you come up with technologies that are eventually economically viable. Here is a list of programs that we plan to mention in our manufacturing policy appropriations letter. Most of them are programs that fall under research development and demonstrations program. Most of them connect to a battery supply chain. There's also one Department of Energy implementation grant program. That's the battery materials processing and battery manufacturing and recycling grants program, long name. And some of you might be familiar, that program funded the battery manufacturer Form Energy, and they're located in Weirton, West Virginia. Okay, let's move on to the next bucket, research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So what we want to see is federal investment programs that fund clean technology and advanced manufacturing. We want to see programs that support energy efficient technologies that help cut carbon emissions, specifically in energy intensive industries. That could be steel, aluminum, cement, chemicals. And those are all incidentally industries that are rather strong in Appalachia. One program that the Department of Energy has is called the Industrial Demonstrations Program. A lot of projects under that program were frozen or canceled by the Trump administration, but not all. An example of a project that was funded and it's still on the Cleveland Cliffs website, seems to be still going. It was an electric furnace upgrade at their steel mill in Butler Works, Pennsylvania. What we also want to see is programs that support manufacturers to invest in energy communities, ideally to use those shuttered industrial sites and build something new. One project that was supported under such a program was battery manufacturer Sparks. That program or that project is currently frozen. What will happen with it is to be determined, but the plan was to build a critical materials production plant in Taylor County, West Virginia, on a former industrial site. I believe it was a glass factory. And that project included a training former mine workers component, and they did that in collaboration with the United Mine Workers Union. We also want to see support for technical assistance program. One we particularly like is the Appalachian Regional Commission's ARISE initiative. That stands for Appalachian Regional Initiative for Stronger Economies. That initiative aims to drive large-scale economic transformation across multiple states in Appalachia. So it's a more comprehensive approach initiative and not just giving funding to one community and have like those communities compete for the funding. We like to see multi-state, more comprehensive approaches. There are other technical assistance programs that support small and medium-sized manufacturers. For instance, there are the Industrial and Technical Assistance Centers. They help with energy efficiency audits. And we also like the manufacturing extension partnership programs and want to see continued funding for them. And again, here is the list of programs. I will not go over them one by another. You will receive the slides in the follow-up email and can take a look, and we're always happy for feedback. Okay, the last bucket I will focus on is workforce and training programs. So what do we want to see funded there? We want to see federal investment in workforce and development programs that support dislocated workers, that support workers with barriers to employment, and that offer earn and learn opportunities, for instance, through registered apprenticeships programs. Federal investment in economic development programs that we like, they help communities with capacity building. And they also take an approach, again, like a more regional approach of help economically distressed regions. And both of those categories, communities that need capacity building and economically distressed regions, energy communities many of them fall into both of those categories. The Economic Development Administration, EDA, had a pilot program called Recompete. That was a workforce development program, actually a workforce and economic development program, targeting economic distressed regions. One awardee was Shaping Our Appalachian Region, SOAR. They're located in Eastern Kentucky. They funded an Eastern Kentucky Runaway Recompete plan with that program, and that is a workforce development program spanning various counties in Eastern Kentucky in collaboration with local educational institutions. And again, here are the workforce and training and economic development programs that we plan to mention to advocate for in our manufacturing appropriations letter. And those are some questions. I think we will have those later also in the Mentimeter. We are happy to get feedback to the programs that I have in the PowerPoint. My email, I will share it in the chat. It's also on those slides. And again, you will receive those with the follow-up email. If there's a program you think we should name that was not in there, please let me know, or other ideas you have regarding our manufacturing policy approach. Yeah, I'm happy to hear, and thank you for listening for me for my presentation. And I will hand it back to Bay, I think.
Yeah, and now we're going to move to hear from Matt with AMCC, and we're looking forward to hearing about some of their framework and ecosystem pillars.
Awesome, Bay. Hello, everybody. I know so many on the call. It's great to see you. I'm Matt Bogosian, Executive Director of AMCC, the nation's manufacturing community of practice. We're funded by EDA, at least to the end of this year. And this is David Van Sickland, our Operations Director. And I'm going to you're going to get this slide deck. So I'm going to quickly rip through, some of these slides that, introduce what we are. We have these great stakeholders around the country. We have a couple of activities I'll tell you about, and a little bit of the history. So David, you just go on. And then we want to get into a conversation, right? This is about building relationships, and we'll come back to this at the end of it. And so, Bay, what you talked about at the beginning, about this being a series, it's really building these trusted relationships that inform, smarter evidence-based narratives and strategies and activation, and ultimately better structures. But I'll come back to that. So the brief history that's going to be in this deck that you can get after the call, this goes back 15 years. My background's in law and policy, and working for the federal government and the National Economic Council 15 years ago. We reviewed the economy, and just, the obvious thing, we divested from manufacturing in many ways at the end of the 20th century, and we need to refocus on that to produce priority products. So we created this one program that really got at the evidence of what is within a thriving regional manufacturing ecosystem of support. And we call it the Big Six now. We had a program that went for a couple of years. We had some great leaders in Pittsburgh. Petra Mitchell here from Catalyst Connection is on. She was one of those participants in the IMCP. You can see a map there of the 24 around the country. And that was a great, baby step to kind of understanding how can you weave all of these federal top-down supports in a region and have it make sense because it's complicated. Each of us are in our own little organization in a silo, and yet you recognize that systems leadership across silos is super important. And it's really hard. We're fragmented and we have these intermittent, inconsistent federal interventions that are trying to help. IMCP was a baby step. And then during the first Trump administration, DOD created, we created AMCC as a national nonprofit after IMCP. And then DOD created this Defense Manufacturing Community Support Program, another good but insufficient attempt to help regions organize around defense product production. Then the next administration came in, again, another whole set of, and Rika was talking about some of these, a whole set of, good but insufficient single agency federal interventions, expecting regional manufacturing ecosystems of support to easily, grab those stimulants and weave them in, knowing that they're going to go away, knowing that they're not really, cross-pollinated around, with other interventions. Dana was talking about state government interventions. Those are critical. Local government, nonprofits, chambers of commerce, et cetera. And so AMCC along the way has been, not only observing this, but helping to try to bring communities again together around an evidence-based ecosystem approach. And we're thrilled to be, partnering with Reimagine in doing that work. And Bay, that one slide you had that was great, just talking about the series of activities. It's about consistently leaning in. That's one of the things that we've learned over 15 years of doing this, trying to get the bottom up to meet the top down. And so having these trusted relationships that you have already here in Appalachia and building more so that you have a relevant voice to speak to with authentic voice, speak to federal policymakers, but also state and local and all of these other intermediary organizations that need to be rowing together, because that's what the evidence says. We've got to row together to get to the objectives that we want. So the thing that I really want to get to here before we get your interaction is these three pillars of what we've kind of co-created with all these stakeholders around the country. And you're already talking about it. It's like, okay, what are we good in what are we good at doing in Appalachia? I think the first question is around this first pillar is like, what are the priority products we want to produce? And so this is a list of big and overlapping areas, but it's key. And you're talking about with all the clean energy, discussion, but these are the big ones because you want your regions to be, producing priority products that are going to be needed for long-term American prosperity. So this is a description of those six. You can see that list there. And of course, with cutting edge technology. And the sub-slide underneath that just lists all of the different cutting edge technologies. And that's a trick. So the first pillar, priority products with emerging technologies. The second pillar is around what you guys at Reimagine have done a really good job of discovering what we've discovered over the years, going back that 15-year project from the IMCP initiative is it's not just one thing. It's you got to do all these things sufficiently in a region for the manufacturers to thrive. We call it the big six. And so it's good to see in the draft plans that you guys have going on that you're hitting so many of these. And of course, it takes all the players in a community, and that's the sub-slide there. It's not just the intermediaries, but it's all the stakeholders in each of those six ecosystem of support areas that need to be engaged. And then, of course, I like what Dana was talking about in terms of sustainable development. That environmental sustainability is important as well, and that was articulated as one of the key challenges that we need to solve for not only national security, economics, but also environmental sustainability and the inequitable access we have to opportunities. And so what I'll kind of lead into our discussion here that we have 20 minutes for is is people leaning in and chiming in on this Mentimeter or discussions here in this 20-minute relationship building. That means leaning in, not just listening, but offering, your perspective from your particular perch within the ecosystem of support so that we can get to those common narratives and common stories that can matriculate to all the stakeholders that need to be making better, data-driven decisions, so we can come up with strategies, activate from our particular silos in a collective impact way, and then ultimately get to better structures, because it's obvious this country doesn't have sufficient structures to enable the kind of outcomes that we want. So we've got to work together to do that. We're thrilled to be, with you guys working to do that. So let's see, we're going to do this Mentimeter thing. Haven't done it before myself, but we have some questions that are laid out there. And so let me do a little calling in the is Petra Mitchell. I called you out earlier from Catalyst Connection in Pittsburgh. Let's see, the first one: in the future, which manufacturing sector would you dream of Appalachia being a global leader in?
So just for some instructions, as Petra's, we'd love to have Petra answer the question out loud, but also this is sort of like our whiteboard or something where we'd want to see your answer
Oh,
on
gotcha.
the screen
Yeah.
too. So
Well,
we
we can
have
do both
folks
and.
participating in their answers will pop up as Petra speaks. So it's interactive. So
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks. Hi, Matt. Hi, everyone. I wasn't sure
Hey.
what I was supposed to do, so thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I'm sitting here in southwestern Pennsylvania, as you had mentioned, Matt, and do quite a bit of project work across into West Virginia with various West Virginia partners around ARC funding and, like you mentioned, defense manufacturing communities and so forth. But I have to say the biggest opportunity that I'm seeing is in energy production. I think the data center boom in our country is creating incredible opportunities for the Appalachian communities to really get back into energy production in a serious way. You mentioned there's a lot of, closed and shuttered coal-fired power plants. A lot of those, especially in Western Pennsylvania, are being looked at very closely to be either maybe converted into natural gas. There's investments in expanding nuclear in Western Pennsylvania. Just a lot of activity around energy production, primarily to support significant growth in energy demand, which is primarily due to AI and data centers. Our region makes the kinds of things that the energy production industry needs. We have an existing established supply chain already from years of being in this supply chain. And I think that's where the tremendous opportunities are going to be to really help and grow that sector and help that supply chain and create hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs for people in our community.
Great. Thanks, Petra. I can see a lot of great input into the Mentimeter. That's great. Keep it coming. Let me turn to let's see, Dan Taylor, Blue Green Alliance. Do you have a take on this? All right. How about let's see, Dan Sweeney.
yeah, Dan, thanks for your comment in the chat if you want to say that out loud too. And if there's policy specific, so Dana noted in the chat about the need for explicit commitments to inclusion. For example, in Illinois, 90% of manufacturing companies are owned by whites. I'd love to hear about kind of policy fixes or ways that we can address that sort of equity issue. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's actually a big opportunity too because of the company succession, right? And there are there's groups like Project Equity and Mechanism that are talking with one another about how to solve for that. But certainly, if we're going to get federal and state support for that transition of the existing nationally, it's over 200,000 manufacturers. Most of those are small and medium-sized enterprises, and most of them are owned, by people that are aging out. So that is a massive challenge. But if we had the tactics to make it an opportunity, we could be making some great progress there. All right, let's go on to the next question. If that makes sense. And again, this is a process, and we'll just keep this going to the other venues and opportunities that they talked about at the beginning. So the next one is as we grow manufacturing, how can and should we ensure the manufacturing development redevelopment is equitable and sustainable in Appalachian regions hungry for economic opportunity?
Yeah. So once again, folks are welcome to put their answers in the Menti so that we can have them up here, but at the same time to come off mute and share their thoughts verbally as well. So there's multiple ways to engage.
And I can just call on people too, right? Yeah. That's one of our
Always.
tactics.
Always.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
great. This is great. So let's see. Deborah Stein, you're there. You have a comment on this one? Yeah.
I think, for me, the equitability is very much related to what somebody mentioned here, which is transportation. One of the things that we've really seen and when I've done focus groups here in the Pittsburgh region where I'm based, with people who are unemployed or people who are aging out of foster care, their biggest challenge is transportation. They have no car, they have no driver's license, and there is the distance, and I also, in other states down in West Virginia, there's a lack of public transportation. About half of the counties in West Virginia don't have public transportation of any kind. And so that makes it really hard, from an equity standpoint, I think, to actually provide sort of the workforce needs so that we could have, manufacturing development, because we definitely know we have a big shortage of manufacturing workers.
Other comments on this one? There's some good comments. Worker voice, alternative forms of ownership, linking workforce to business creation. Any other comments on this one before we go on to the next one? So we're doing okay on time. Yeah, let's take our time here.
Maybe Petra has some addition.
Oh, please, Petra. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I didn't have my hand raised, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Debbie's absolutely right about the transportation, and it really has to do with that deeper problem of that we just don't have enough workers to meet manufacturing demand, even as it sits today. And so, as I was talking about the future and new demand that could be created, none of it really can come to fruition unless we develop workers. And a big part of that, I think, is starting at younger ages. And that's where I think a lot of that equity can come into play, is that, really looking at all areas of our communities, urban, rural, suburban. There are young people in all of those communities, and they should all be given the opportunities to pursue careers in manufacturing and related sectors. And I just don't think we're doing enough there.
Thanks, Petra. Emma, please.
Yeah, hi, Emma Yard from the ARM Institute. Just to tag on to what Petra said, I know that Catalyst has also done some work with employer relations, and they do workforce matching and help match workers with employers that have been like vetted through previous workers. So I think as we talk about making redevelopment equitable, building on that employer training piece and making sure that we're giving employers the skills to create equitable workplaces, because we can do all of the recruitment in rural or, urban areas where a lot of our Black youth live. But if we're setting them up and putting them into workplaces where they're working with folks who are hostile to people from their background or not hostile, but just don't know how to interact with somebody who has a different background, we're setting them up for failure. So I think the employer training piece is also a key part of that. And I know that Catalyst has done some of that in Pittsburgh.
Great. Jordy, please.
It's been, 6 years since the pandemic, and I still have to learn to hit the unmute button. This is kind of more of a vibes comment, so I don't have good data, or I might be off base, but like, I think that the workforce piece can be super important. At the same time, having lived in this part of rural Pennsylvania and been through a couple of waves, especially with like fracking for the last 20 years and now with AI, in general, I feel like there's often like a lot of talk about jobs, and what ends up happening is a very few highly technical jobs that bring people in from other states for gig work or for consulting. And so there isn't the translation of like manufacturing or economic renaissance into like sustainable prosperity at the local level. And sort of related, I feel like, and I don't work in this area, so I may be way off base, but I feel like there's just a strong expectation that communities and community colleges and all these community partners are supposed to fall all over themselves to generate like workers for industries whose needs are going to change all the time. And so, is that a balanced deal, right? Are they committing to hiring some of the people coming out of these workforce pipelines? So I don't know.
Great.
If that's
Yeah,
off
no,
base
it's
or if I stepped
good
on toes, I
input,
apologize.
Jordy. Thank you for that. And just a reminder, we want to talk to people with just like that, coming off a camera and talking, but also include your ideas in the Mentimeter, because Reimagine's collecting that information, that data. So Karen and then Justin, please.
Sorry about that. I'm with Appalachian Early Childhood Network, and we are part of the SOAR project that's going on in Eastern Kentucky. And all of the things you guys are bringing up are so crucial in the very basics. We have to help them get their education and training to do these new jobs. We have to get them a way to get to where they're going, and they have to find childcare. That's where the piece we're coming in at, because if you don't have a place to live, and you don't have transportation and all that, which is a lot of rural areas. So I was excited to see a lot of that going into these answers, because that's huge. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Karen, for saying it. And let's go to Justin. And can we go to the next Mentimeter so people can start filling in that one?
Thanks, Justin Williams, West Virginia Building Trades. So what I put in the Menti was a diversification, both of types of materials, types of manufacturing, but also size and scope. Because, we only hear about massive manufacturing kind of things, but something that employs 10 people can be just as valuable to a community as something that employs 600 people. And then following up on Jordy's point, I think we have to do a better job of, I'll say, not pigeonholing people, right? So to his point, they say, oh, okay, we come in and we community technical colleges train for this, train for that, right? So we're trying to expand, our recruitment efforts into, in construction, but it's not just construction, right? It's energy, it's technology, it's infrastructure. You have to frame it in a new pathway to get folks interested in these careers, and we all have to be adaptable. I mean, in today's world, it's going to change, and so there has to be that ability to adapt.
Thank you, Justin. And you see, we got the new Mentimeter up. So, hey, folks, look at this. What's a systemic barrier? Policy, permitting, financing, coordination, et cetera, that slows manufacturing innovation, and how could it be removed or improved? Okay, so this is important. Think about what are the barriers, like from your silo. You can't know everything, right? You see from your particular silo, if you're, part of, one part of the big six, not at all, right? It's like from my perch, this is a barrier. Go for it, Janine. Yeah, hi.
Hi, I actually put my hand up, but it was relevant a little more to the prior, but I'll throw
That's
it out
okay.
there.
Go
I
for
think
it.
it's
Yeah.
relevant here as well, but that workforce issue is an issue. And the system is kind of well-intentioned, but really complex in its framing. And to get the federal funds, right, there's a lot of apprenticeship tied toward unionized workforce, which is great, but not all of these positions are unionized. There's also a need for the employer to show, like, to get lasting funding through the workforce investment boards. You've got to, have employers commit to jobs for X period of time. So it's a really multiple step process that feels challenging in order to be agile and responsive to these newer things we're trying to accomplish. But I would say the other system, so that is a systemic barrier in my view. I think there's a lot of really good intent and a lot of good things, but it doesn't feel as synthesized and smooth as it should. To your point about community colleges earlier and all this funding, it's complicated. It's way too complicated. And the other piece is around not having a clear, focused strategy um, of alignment across the region. So if it is, as Petra suggested, energy, which we think would make sense, right, and that whole supply chain around it, there have been multiple proposals floated before across different portions of the region and different bodies, but there's not been a unified adoption of saying, we're going to be the best widget manufacturers possible, and we're going to be the world leaders, and we're going to build out the entire value chain of that. You know, we're the Detroit of transmission and distribution, or whatever it might be, but that is not there right now. And that lack of that catalyzing leadership creates its own sort of systemic vacuum.
Here, here. And that's the challenge. We're doing this because it's hard, right? And we need to have regions organize themselves around the best evidence, the framework that you can re-look at when you get our deck, the big 6 elements in a region, super important, kind of on-ramp to understanding that. We have a partnership with Reimagine on developing the use of a manufacturing intelligence platform that brings all of the public-facing data together for free in a region, so regions can assess some of these barriers that we're talking about in this Mentimeter. So let's go on to the next one in the last few minutes we have, and we can get some input, and then we can wrap it up, right? What past or current government programs, policies have been most useful to Appalachian manufacturing? So, what's good now? What's good in the past? You heard, our little spiel about all of these, intermittent ones going way back 15 years to the IMCP program. There's been a lot of others. What's worked? What part of it's worked? We know overall it hasn't, and none of them in and of themselves have, created nirvana here in manufacturing, but it'd be good to get folks' take. The Appalachia Regional Commission, a RISE program, I see that. Inflation Reduction Act money. Is there anybody? Feel free if you want to come on off camera and talk about it. Somebody put the MEPs. That's interesting. That's one, it's been around for decades, always fighting for, consistent funding from the feds, but at least it's one somewhat sustained federal policy intervention into regions. So that's one of our big observations, is that we need to get off of this intermittent federal support region, having efforts regionally led, but having more federal support. And back to Dana's earlier point, states have to get into the action too. They got to row together. In our deck that you'll see later, there's some examples of other states. California has moved out in terms of a bottom-up regional strategy. There's some cool things happening in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia and other places around the country. All of this is what Appalachian communities can look at as models, and then make and build off that to continue this good momentum. Yeah, apprenticeship utilization, recompete for energy communities. That's great. That's great. Well, there's 3. Oh, please. Yeah.
Sorry. One thing that's happening, we are in the running. I say we, this community led by WVU primarily, for an NSF Engines grant. And I think that could be transformative if we're selected for that, for sure. I mean, that's the next iteration, I think, of the IMCP, DMCSP, tech hubs. Now they're talking NSF Engines.
Yeah, here. That does look promising, Petra. Thanks for calling that out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we have a couple of minutes left. And Bay, I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to wrap it up and maybe review the momentum that this gathering has sparked to the other events that you have coming up.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. And someone on the team, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you can still fill this out even as we head into the last minutes here and even as we close up. So If you'd like a minute to read what other folks said or add any additional thoughts, you can definitely do so. And as always, you can reach out to us if you would like to continue any of these conversations one-on-one. But it has come time for my least favorite time. I always hate when we have to wrap up because I love being in community with all of you, and I think we really have some good conversation going, and I hate to cut that off, so sorry about that, Matt, but we are right up against the hour, and I feel like it flew by. So just a huge thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy day to be here with us and to start these conversations. And all of your input here will be taken and processed by the team and will help influence our federal policy platform. And there's more on that to come. So once our appropriations letter is ready to go, we'll share that out for maybe some feedback and input. And we'll share the finished product as well. And as we mentioned, AMAP is in draft form. So we are looking for input and feedback. Please reach out to us. You can also leave comments. It is a Google Doc, so you can do that there. And up next, we'll have an in-person event on July 7th in Huntington, West Virginia. So if you're in the area, maybe you can join us. Or if you're close to Pittsburgh, maybe you can join us on July 9th with Petra and Catalyst Connection. So we're really looking forward to that. And again, we will follow up to everyone that registered here through email, and we'll share all the presentations that you saw. We'll even share the Mentimeter responses and all the links that we shared of the story map and the AMAP draft and the great presentation and framework that AMCC shared. And they also have a national call every Monday. So we'll share that too. I encourage you to join them there. It's always a great space to be in community. But thanks again from me and the Reimagine Appalachia team, and thanks to our speakers and everyone who was brave enough to come off mute. So we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.